on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples who have lived in the Salish Sea Basin, the San Juan Islands, and the North Cascades watershed since time immemorial. We express our deep thanks to our indigenous neighbors, the Tulalip tribes, the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, and Snoqualmish tribes, and other allied bands signatory to the Treaty of Point Elliott for their enduring care and protection of our shared lands and waterways. Well, again, welcome. Tonight we have a number of things to talk about, things that hopefully are of importance and interest to you. This is an opportunity to learn about what is expected in the next legislative session, to voice your priorities and ask questions. If you would like to ask a question, you are welcome to type that in. If you're on Zoom, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. And if you would type your question there, we'll be saving that for later on in the program tonight. Also, if you're on Facebook or if you're on Zoom, you can type your questions in the comments section, and someone will be looking to share those later on in our presentation. So before we get started with some of the issues, open it up for some brief opening remarks from your lawmakers. Turn it over to Representative Berg to be followed by Mr. Lovick.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you to everyone attending this town hall tonight. My name is Representative April Berg, and I am proud to be your representative right here in the 44th. It's exciting. I think this is our second town hall. And just to let you know, we have some great topics on deck. But so you know who I am John Lovick's seatmate. And so I love the fact that I can say that everywhere I go. But I'm also the vice chair of our House Finance Committee. I'm on our local governments committee, and I'm also on education. I am passionate about serving you every day and in every way in this great, beautiful community that spans Mill Creek to Marysville. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my seatmate.
Thank you, April. I haven't figured out all of this technology yet, even though we've been doing this for over a year. I want to start by thanking Mr. Trueit. I've had the great honor of visiting his class, I don't know, 25, 30 times. And I don't refer to him as a teacher. I refer to him and all of those great leaders in our community as nation builders. Really appreciate the great work you do. I was in his class a few weeks ago. And if you visit his class, you better be prepared to answer the tough questions because those kids come prepared. I also want to take just a brief second to thank our two legislative assistants. I know your legislative assistant is Catherine and mine is Samir. And I always tell people it doesn't matter what we do, they are the ones that make these offices run smoothly. So thank you. I'm Representative Lovick. This is my 14th year serving in the legislature. I'm honored beyond words to serve you. And I always tell people that there's nothing good that comes from a pandemic. There's nothing good that comes from social unrest. There's nothing good that comes from all of the just pretty much horrible things that we have had to deal with. But I was out having coffee just yesterday with a retired Navy captain by the name of Matt Arney. He retired from the Whidbey Island Naval Station, and he shared something with me that I thought was just a great quote. He said, in the circumstance, in the situation we're in, we can either live in a cage or in a cocoon. And he said, if we live in a cage, we're going to come out kind of dirty and not doing things. If we live in a cocoon, we're going to come out vibrant and doing a lot of great things. So that's what this town hall hopefully is about tonight. So let's be vibrant. Let's talk to each other. And I always say this everywhere I go. We're not enemies. We might not all know each other. We might not necessarily be good friends, but we are not enemies. We want to work with you. We're going to have some disagreements. We're going to have some agreements, but we need to work together because that is what community is all about. And I'll say this, I look forward to the day that we can stand together and meet in person. So thank you very, very much and look forward to the questions.
Okay, thank you for your opening remarks, Representative Lovick and Representative Berg. Tonight, we've divided some questions into three categories. Those categories are education, economic recovery, and healthcare. Again, if you have questions that pertain to those categories, look in Zoom for the Q&A section. In Facebook, it's your comments, as well as YouTube comments as well. So feel free to type them in at any time. And towards the end of our hour, our time together, we'll be sharing as many as possible. So first topic is education and reopening. And the first question is, what can we do to help children and staff feel safe and continue teaching within the classroom? And Ms. Berg, if you'd like to start first, that'd be appreciated.
Thank you so much. And I know this is a question near and dear to your heart, Mr. Trueit, because you're in that classroom every day, and I cannot thank you enough for your service. The thing that we need to do as a community is get vaccinated. That is the number one thing. We must be vaccinated, not just for ourselves, but for our community and for our kiddos. We know that last year, and honestly, the last year and a half, were so difficult not having our children in a traditional school setting. And it was because of this public health crisis. The way that we've been able to reopen schools and do it safely is by having all of not only our teachers, but all of our teachers, all of our paraeducators, our staff members, our support staff members, even our parents who volunteer. It's a community effort. And so once folks are vaccinated, that protects the community and it allows our schools to stay open. Now, beyond that, there's a couple of things I like going back to the basics sometimes when we talk about school reopenings. And so if your kiddo is not feeling well, don't send them to school. If there's even a question, don't send them to school. One of the things that we noticed in our household, and I think a lot of folks out there noticed, was that we got less colds last season, and that was kind of nice. And I know Mr. Trueit probably can attest to the petri dish of that first week of school where you're kind of catching stuff, and this is pre-COVID. But now we're really into good hand sanitation, good hygiene practices in the classroom, and that all is honestly going to keep our schools open more than anything else. The other thing is contact tracing. And so I just want to give a shout out to teachers who are doing amazing work with seat charts. And you think as a parent, as a community member, well, what's the big deal of a seat chart? That's no big deal. It's a huge deal because that is how we contact trace. And so what I want to tell parents and caregivers is that it's really important that you make sure your child and your student really pays attention to that seating chart so that if we do have to do contact tracing, we'll know exactly who to reach out to. And the last thing I'm going to say on this subject, because it was a question that's come up often, is what happens with our kiddos when we do have an outbreak and we do have to do contact tracing. They stay home, but maybe they don't have access to their free and reduced lunch, breakfast, or lunch? And the answer is you still absolutely do. Reach out to your local school and they will make arrangements for you to have food picked up for your student while they're quarantining. And so if you have questions, again, your local school is the best point of information for that. But please do not think that your kiddos have to go hungry if they are quarantining because of contact tracing. All of these steps with vaccination as the foundation is what's going to keep our schools open.
And can I just touch on this just briefly? I really appreciate Rep. Berg's approach to this, and I appreciate her leadership. She is a school board director, and we've had more than a few conversations about this. But I just want to share something with you just to underscore something she said. When I visited Mr. Truett's class, I think it was 3.5 weeks ago, someone told me that school started at 7:30. Well, being the smart guy that I am, I pulled into the parking lot at 7:30. Wrong. That's not the right time to pull into the parking lot at Jackson High School. But while I was there, I decided to take notice of what the kids were doing. And I noticed that every kid got off the bus or got out of a car and they had a mask on. And this was the most impressive part. I stood back as the kids walked into the building and every kid had a mask on. If that kid did not have his or her mask on properly, maybe if it had dropped just slightly below the nose, someone would kind of give them a signal. One of the vice principals would just give them a little signal to move the mask up. Not a single kid objected. And I saw 5 or 6 kids. They would just reach up and adjust it and they kept walking. I have to tell you what, Mr. Trueit, leadership. It's leadership on your part, and these kids are leading us also. So they know what to do. We just need to continue to provide leadership. And I just want to underscore one more thing that Rep. Berg said. I'm a guy that I've had asthma most of my life. And because I've worn the mask and I've tried to follow the science, I've not suffered from the setbacks that I've had previously because of all the things that go on. So I would say, just like Rep. Berg said, follow the science. We're going to get through this, but we're going to get through this together.
Thank you so
Absolutely. And our kids, I was just going to say, our kids want to be in school. So
They do.
for everybody listening, they want it, they listen because they want to be there. So
Yeah.
so if we all as parents can listen like our kiddos can, I think we're going to be in good shape.
Yeah, and I'll just say this: my daughter-in-law, and my son-in-law are teachers, and they absolutely they this is all they've ever wanted to do. They want those kids in the classroom, and we're going to have to work together. This is going to work. This is going to happen.
Great. Thank you so much for those answers. And I have to say that I've been truly inspired by the cooperation of the entire community. Certainly the efforts have been amazing from our elected representatives, Ms. Berg and Mr. Lovick, but it goes all the way down through the staff, the administration,
Yes.
the families, and of course, the students. The students have truly been amazing during this pandemic. They've done a lot that no other group of students have ever been asked to do. And again, it's very inspiring. Okay, moving on. The next question has to do with ensuring that Washington can offer childcare and early learning. So it's always been crucial, especially when we get our students back in the classroom. What can happen this session to support childcare and early learning? And this time, Mr. Lovick, would you like to start?
Absolutely. So let me just tell you this. I'll just talk about some of the things that we did, and we're going to continue with some of these efforts. You know, I supported the funding the Fair Start for Kids Act, and we put up $790 million in the program. That's close to $1 billion. That included $400 million for child care grants, and for also $90 million for Working Connections child care copay. One of the number one issues that people talk to me about is the cost of childcare. If you noticed, President Biden's approach to it is to try and help with childcare. I did some research just before we started the meeting, and I like to do a lot of reading. When I tell you that nothing good comes from a pandemic, the one good thing that comes from it is you get to spend a lot of time reading. And I found that the average family is paying $1,100 per month for childcare. Now, I haven't had kids in college in a long time, but I understand that that's a lot more than you would pay, that they would be paying to keep a kid in, in a basic college program. So I believe that it's incumbent upon us to do all we can to make sure that we keep these programs going. And in my conversations in the legislature with the leadership team, of which I'm a part of, we're going to do all we can to make sure that we help provide some of those services.
Yeah, and just to chime in, Rep. Lovick, thank you for having those stats, and thank you for making sure folks know about the Fair Start for Kids Act, because it's really important. I think we sometimes forget how big some of these bills are that we pass, but the number one thing when I talk to businesses, when I talk to education leaders, when I talk to really anyone in community trying to get back to the normal that we had pre-COVID, the number one barrier they talk about is lack of childcare. And that's everything from underfunding to childcare deserts. And so our approach from the legislature was to really try and attack all of that. But the thing that underpins it all is getting a fair living wage for our childcare providers and ensuring that there's enough funding there to do that. Overwhelmingly, our childcare providers are women, and they're women of color. And so it's important to our entire community, especially our women, because for this pandemic, for women, it was really kind of a she-demic. We got hit with a lot of extra duties, both at home and sometimes not able to really have the support that we needed to help take care of the kids, to do the work outside of the home. And on top of that, having to do school at home. So it was really in my world, it was a she-demic as well as a pandemic. And so part of what we did with funding for childcare was really looking at it holistically to make sure we had the supports necessary in all of our communities to increase quality childcare for all kids.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to our second topic of the evening. That's economic recovery. And the first question is, as infrastructure in the 44th increasingly requires additional funding to maintain and expand things like roads, what projects are you looking to fund in the upcoming transportation package? And Ms. Berg, would you like to start us?
I was actually going to throw that to Rep. Lovick first. He's on transportation. And so
Please,
I
please.
don't like I like to stay in my lane, but I'm going to have him answer and then I'll kind of chime in.
Stay in your lane is a good pun, and I like puns. So, let me just say, Mr. Trueit, there are a lot of things that we need to do, and any conversation that I have anywhere that I go, the conversation centers around the Hewitt Avenue trestle. You probably know that that is an old bridge. I don't know how old it is, probably older than I am, which is probably getting up there, but that's a very, very old bridge. We need to fund that trestle. We need to put together a transportation package. Everywhere I go, we got a message from every city that we represent saying, get a package out there. I can tell you some of the good things that we did. We put $3.1 million into the Lake Stevens Early Learning Library and the Snow Isle Regional Library System. $2.1 million into the Civic Center. We also put $10 million into public transit, and they're asking for more. So we're going to have to sit down. It's going to be a quick session, but I believe that the number one priority, that the number one thing that we need to focus on is getting a transportation package and building a new bridge. We need to fund that westbound Hewitt Avenue trestle.
Yeah, and I would echo what Rep. Lovick said about the trestle, but I also want to just take this moment to talk about transportation in the 44th. And I will tell you, it's a challenge. You know, our district is long, it's skinny, and we represent a lot of folks, Rep. Lovick. I don't know if you've seen those numbers, but there's a lot of folks who are depending on our representation all the way from Mill Creek to Marysville. And so I had the opportunity this summer, or this, I guess it was early fall, to take the bus across our district. And so I just want to take this moment to plug public transportation and community transit, both as a transportation issue, but also as an environment issue. I think we need to start getting creative and talking very seriously about public transit and what it can do and what it is doing in our communities. So I will tell you, I was able to take 2 buses and get across this district from the Swift bus just over to the 109 all the way up to the Lake Stevens Transit Center. That said, I think a lot of folks on this call probably know we can now access easier. I won't say it's perfect, but it is way easier to access downtown Seattle now that light rail has gotten just a little bit closer. So we are making strides in transportation, not just roads and bridges, but also in public transit, because the more cars we get off the road, and love the folks out there driving EVs, electrical vehicles, but you know what? We need to get those off the road too, because we need just more space on our roads. So if you can take public transit, do it. I know it can be done. As your legislator, as your representative, when I hit Seattle, it is most times on the bus, and I'm looking forward to my next trip in on light rail.
And I'll just say this too. I went down for the opening 2 Fridays ago of light rail, and I have to tell you, the listeners or those on this call, you need to try it, because we hopped on, and then that following Saturday, the Mariners were playing their last game, and we went down. Wasn't the best time to go, but I think we went from Northgate down to Soto, and it was like, you got to be kidding me. I would reach for my phone to start the stopwatch, and we were at the next station. We were at the UW station. We were at the next station. We're making great strides, and there's a lot of progress being made. But at the same time, we need to use some of those facilities. And we had a meeting yesterday with Community Transit, and they're rerouting a lot of their buses to take people from this area right down to Northgate. They're hopping on a bus, taking it to the airport, taking it into downtown. We're doing the things that we thought would happen. I know you and I talked about this, Mr. Trueit, many, many years ago when we were talking about funding sound transit, and they're coming through. So I'm really pleased with the work that's taking place. We probably need to look at connecting some of those spines and making sure we get the funding to federal funding to connect some of those spines, say out to the airport, Paynefield, north, and then on up to the Everett station.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Lovick and Ms. Berg. It's a big problem, big issue, and it looks as though we are definitely making some progress with some work yet to go further. I want to remind people that you can type in your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom. And if you're on Facebook or YouTube, in the comment section, and we'll try and get to those in a couple of minutes coming up. But we're up to our next scheduled topic, which is healthcare, and talk about just the investment of work our healthcare professionals have put in and the courageous work they've done. It's just been nonstop, and they continue to do amazing things for us. So first question about that is that the deeply rooted systemic issues in Washington state have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. What have you supported to make sure Black, brown, elderly, disabled, and low-income communities are supported? And Ms. Berg, do you want to start with this, Representative Berg?
Absolutely. And thank you for that question. And I think as we go into modes of recovery, right, where things are starting to get more normalized, there is a tendency sometimes to forget that there are absolutely marginalized communities that are still really suffering in this pandemic, and especially economically. So one of the first things we did this session was come in and use part of the federal funding that we had to actually help those hard hit communities. We did about $2.2 billion that we allocated. It was part of our early action. It was our step one for Washington community and economic recovery. And we really did target those most impacted and disproportionately harmed by COVID, those communities you just talked about. We're talking about struggling renters, small businesses, small restaurants, school districts, uninsured, underinsured, and of course our communities of color that really did have unequal opportunities and outcomes in this pandemic. It still continues. So we're still continuing. That was not a one and done. Just to talk with you a little bit about some other things we did. It was one of the things that I was most proud of was what we did with housing and just cause evictions. And so when you really think about housing and the pandemic and how this is really affecting folks literally in their homes and being able to keep their homes, we passed a historic bill prohibiting no cause 20-day evictions. And that is really key to keeping folks in their homes when they most need to stay. And we also put into place where low-income renters would actually have access to public defense, to low cost or no cost defense when trying to defend themselves against eviction. So all of that works together. And I think, part of COVID, so many of our issues like homelessness, like food insecurity did not occur because solely of COVID, but those things were there before COVID. COVID exacerbated it. So what we did as a legislature last session was really try to tackle it head on, both financially, so fiscally, but then also policy wise, because as so many of us know, poverty really sometimes comes down to policy choices. And so we made this choice the last legislative session to do things that are anti-poverty in nature. So I was proud to be a part of that work, and I know the work's continuing. We still have communities that are hurting. And when we get back at it next session, top of mind will be what do we need to do next to help our marginalized communities?
One of the things that I noticed, I was listening to a hearing in front of the Law and Justice Committee, and a lady stepped up, and her name was Monisha. And she said something, and I know Rep. Berg has heard me say this so many times, she's probably gonna smile and say, here he goes, there he goes again. But she said something that stayed with me, and it will stay with me forever. She said, the year 2020 gave us perfect vision. Now think about that, 2020. She said, the year 2020 gave us perfect vision. It clearly showed us the inequities that exist in our society. And that's inequities on all sides. I've heard people say things like, you're gonna be treated better if you are rich and guilty than you will be if you are poor and innocent. It opened our eyes to a lot of things. One of the things that I worked on, and I'm really, really happy I had a chance to work on this with Representative Orwell from down in the Federal Way area, worked on a bill. It's the 988 crisis call line. Where people are in crisis, and a lot of people are in crisis, and they can call this 988 crisis line and get the help that they need. We actually put $5 million. I wanted to get more, but unfortunately, it was a tight ask into the law enforcement assisted program. That's LEAD, L-E-A-D. Those are the things that we did. We stepped up to the plate, and we are going to do more. But I am excited for everyone on this call, and Mr. Trueit, I'm really excited to see how when we open this crisis hotline, and Berg and I were up in Everett a month ago. It will be housed in the building right there where the Everett Herald is located, right on 41st. And it's exciting, the great work that they are going to do. You know, like I said, the year 2020 gave us perfect vision, and we are reacting and responding to what we learned from this last year. Okay,
thank you, Mr. Lovick. And moving on, we'll go on to kind of a bonus round topic, and that has to do with law enforcement, and specifically, Mr. Lovick, from your experience as a former trooper and serving us as our county sheriff, what is your opinion on the impact legislation will have on the men and women of law enforcement, and what things need to be done during this session to assist in their and provide them support?
Yeah. So I always tell people this, and not everybody gets it, but I still say it. People hate change, and they hate the way things are. And that's just pretty much the way it is. We hate change, and we hate the way things are. I was down Monday meeting in Auburn with the South King County mayors. That's from Renton, Auburn, Kent, and Federal Way. And they all said the same thing. They all said that we need some type of police reform. I tell people this all the time, that 99.9% of the brave men and women who go to work every day go out there to do their job and to do it well. But also tell them that I'm Black, I'm brown, and I'm blue. What I mean by that is that I'm a Black man, my skin is brown, but I wore the blue uniform with honor for 31 years. When I left the State Patrol, I had 10 hash marks on my sleeve. That's 3 years per hash mark. I spent 31 years. Men and women do a great job, but we need some reform. I think watching George Floyd get murdered back in May of last year opened our eyes to what happens. The officer who killed George Floyd does not represent all of the brave men and women. But if we make a decision that we're not going to do something, and we had to make a decision, some of the things we did, there will be some unintended consequences. So as I'm going around in the community, meeting with the police chiefs, meeting with the mayors, I'm saying that we're going to correct those things. The governor signed 13 bills. And what it's going to come down to, there are about 4 issues that people are dealing with. One being the Involuntary Treatment Act, one being issues with pursuits, one being, I'll have to think of the other 2, but they're very, very, and maybe April, you can think of them because I've been talking about them so much and I just have so much stuff in front of me. But those are the areas that we are going to have to go back and we're going to have a discussion about them. We're talking with all of the chiefs, with the stakeholders, and we're going to make the corrections that if we need to make them, we will get back. When we go back to Olympia, we will do them. But for the most part, I have to agree with the 4 mayors in South King County. We needed reform, and we passed some police reform, and we think it's going to be very successful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lovick. Now to the point where we can start sharing some of the questions. And Mr. Lovick, Senator Harris has a question to follow up or add to the issue of policing in the state of Washington, with the news media talking about the loss of people in the police force in various parts of our state. What do you think can be done in the legislature this year to help reverse that trend and help to keep citizens safe?
Well, that's a good question. And let me just tell you one of the responsibilities we all have in a community. We not only want to be safe, we want to feel safe. I am disappointed when we lose. I was reading just today that the State Patrol, an agency that I spent 31 years with, is losing 74 officers. What we don't tell people is that there are still 1,000 state troopers working for the State Patrol. I'm disappointed when I see that the Seattle Police Department is losing hundreds of officers. Every year, people retire and they do things, but by the same token, I was at the academy a month ago, and there were 6 academy classes there, 30 members per class, and that's 180 new officers that will be on the streets after they finish their training, new recruits. It's unfortunate. I think we need to do more. I have some proposals that I have some things I'm going to propose in the next legislative session to encourage more retention. But the brave men and women who are out there, I think, are doing a fantastic job, and we need to make sure that we recognize the great work that they do. And some of those who shouldn't be there, it's probably one of the best decisions that they could ever make. If they choose not to continue, that's the way it should be. But I have to say this much, Mr. Truett, I have to take 1 second to apologize to the public for a comment that a state trooper made when he signed out of service. It used to be a tradition that your last call was you would grab your microphone and honorably sign out of service, thanking the community for allowing you to serve them. And this trooper said something that should not be repeated. I apologize to the governor for him saying that, because that's not who we are. That's not what represents law enforcement, the brave men and women who are out there. You take the high road even when you resign.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative Lovick. And Representative Berg, is there anything you'd like to add to that, or your thoughts on the issue?
Yeah, so for me, the law enforcement, it's been an issue. And I think one of the things, and Rep. Lovick has been such a champion on it, one of the things that I've really asked everyone to do, especially at the city and county level, is to reach out to us so that as we go back into session, we do know exactly what to do or we know what some of the concerns are specifically. I think one of the things that we've really struggled with as lawmakers is that we talked with a lot of folks. Rep. Lovick, literally went out to each and every police chief and talked and worked through the issues. And now it just seems to be sometimes a misunderstanding of what we're actually doing in the realm of law enforcement and policing. But I will say that we are keeping folks safe. We are, I know that folks who have reached out to me saying they feel safer than they did before the laws were passed. And we are keeping our community safe.
And Mr. Truett, can I just point out, the governor signed 13 bills, and there were 4 issues that law enforcement, the community is talking with us about: pursuits, the Terry stops, which is probable cause versus reasonable suspicion, and it gets a little complicated, so I won't get into it, the Involuntary Treatment Act, and less lethal weapons. We've had great conversations about those. You're going to hear a lot of stories, but we are collecting this information, and when we get back to the legislature, if we need to make some tweaks to those to make them, there are some ambiguities there, we're going to make sure that they are taken care of.
Thank you again.
Absolutely.
A new question about education, related to education, from Sean Haddock. And this, I think that a good start would be Representative Berg. Sean says school overcrowding and need for modernization is a big challenge as our county grows, particularly in the Everett School District. Last 2 or 3, ? School bond levies received overwhelming majority support, but failed to pass due to the required 60% supermajority. Is there a discussion and movement within the legislature to lower the supermajority funding requirement?
That's a great question. Thank you, Sean, for that. The only thing I'll add to is I think it may be close to 4 or 5 last bonds that have failed. And so not only is there a movement or discussion, there's actually a bill. And so I was happy to co-sponsor with Representative Stonier a bill to move from a supermajority to a simple majority for school bond passage rates. Now, I will say we're there with levies. So right now, a school levy can pass the simple majority. Communities can make decisions for themselves with a simple majority saying, yes, we want this in our community. We want this levy to pass. For bonds, it's a different story, and we must move to a simple majority. Our schools are suffering, they're overcrowded, and it's not just in the Everett district, it's absolutely statewide. And the bill is really simple. It just basically says one person, one vote. And if we have a majority of people in the community that want to fund a bond, then that bond passes. I hope that it can get over the finish line this session. That said, we need a supermajority to get it over the finish line in both the House and Senate. So it's one of those ironic things. And one of the reasons, and I've heard this before from folks who aren't in agreement with changing from a supermajority to a simple majority, they said, well, it's just going to raise taxes. And I really believe passionately in local control, that we should have the ability to say yes or no. And I say this much to the consternation of some school board directors, that if a bond is running in your community and you don't want it to pass, you feel like it's not doing the right things or good enough things or too much money, then you should have the absolute ability to vote against it. But your vote against it should not count more than your neighbor's vote for it. So Sean, we're working on it. I'm hoping to get that over the finish line, but it's going to take a real community effort statewide, because we do need that supermajority in both chambers.
Thank you very much. And Representative Lovick, your thoughts on the issue?
I've been there for 14 years and I've heard the same conversation. I thought in 2007, we were very, very close to getting there. And it's going to be a tough one. Like Rep. Berg said, we have to have a supermajority in both the House and the Senate and signed by the governor. I have no doubt the governor would sign the bill, but getting a supermajority in the environment, we have 57 votes in our caucus. It's going to be a pretty heavy lift.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, this next question from a viewer has to do with an issue that I first became aware of in 1988 or 89 as a news director for a radio station in Eastern Washington. This comes from Georgia Davenport, who says that Senate Bill 5204, the Whole Washington Health Trust Bill, would create a nonprofit universal healthcare system in Washington state. During a pandemic, it seems critical we get a universal healthcare system passed so everyone can access healthcare. Would one of you be willing to introduce this bill in the House? And who would like to go first?
I'll go ahead and go first, and I might be getting out of my lane with Rep. Berg, but let me just say, I like to carefully read the bill before we, because it's not whether you introduce it or not, it's not whether you sign on to it or not, it's whether you vote for it. And I like to, and I'm not trying to duck the question, I like to know more about it before I say I would introduce it. I'm looking at my list here. I have something like 13 proposals that I'm going to introduce this year. I haven't committed to which ones I'm going to stick with because at some point, the Speaker of the House, Representative Jenkins, is going to say you can only introduce a certain amount of bills. But I would love to have him give me a call and have a conversation about this. He can reach out to my office and I'd love to talk about it more.
Okay. Yeah, and I just to chime in, I think that's a great question. And I just want to be super clear. I do believe healthcare is a human right, and that was absolutely, we have seen why that needs to be the case, because we are in the midst of a global health crisis like none other. That said, when it comes to bill introduction and sponsorship, I'm right with Rep. Lovick, where we do have to read it, figure out what it does, and really strategize about the best way to get something that we really want done. And I say that having all of 1 year under my belt. And Rep. Lovick, remind me, how many bills did I get passed? Was I able to maybe get a couple over the finish line this first year? I think there was about 5.
I thought you did better than I did in my first 5 years in the legislature. So yeah, take a victory lap.
Well, and the only reason I say that is that I'm a strategic thinker, right? Yeah. I want to make sure if I put my name on it and I put my passion behind it, that there's going to be, maybe not, I didn't expect all 5 to be passed and signed into law. I will admit that was a surprise for me. But that said, I want to strategically get there. But one thing I do want to highlight that we did in healthcare that I don't think either of us have talked about is that we did have a bill that did strengthen public healthcare. The conversation for me is really about marrying public health with public medicine, right? So we really need to get to the point of having community health and community medicine and that prevention somewhere where it's meeting the needs of everyone. And so the strengthening public health bill that we had passed, and it was introduced by Rep. Riccelli, who's amazing advocate in all things good for all people. And this really, it created a public health advisory board within the Department of Health to advise and give feedback to governmental public health systems, right? And the big piece of that is that now there's going to be a local balance of membership of these boards. So we're going to have elected officials, public health professionals, healthcare facilities providers, as well as, and this is the key, community members with lived experience on these boards. So I hate to say the word incremental, but we're getting there incrementally when it comes to public health and doing the right thing. But I absolutely believe that public health and healthcare is a human right.
Okay, thank you very much. You actually, it's almost like you read my mind and the mind of one of our viewers tonight. The question is, are there any bills that didn't pass the legislature last session that you are excited to support this session? And even though you mentioned one already, are there others, Representative Berg?
Yeah, that didn't get across the finish line. So yes, there are. And I just want to highlight one in particular, the anti-displacement bill that I was really happy to co-sponsor with Representative Harris Talley. And that's a bill to really keep your eye on. And that bill would give a property tax deduction on your first $250,000 of your house. And that's important because, again, the title of the bill says it all: anti-displacement, keeping folks in their homes, lowering taxes in order to keep folks in their homes. And that's what that bill does. So we'll be working hard to get that, move that further. I'm going to say that one is going to be one that's going to take a supermajority as well, because it is tied to a House, a joint resolution, because it does affect our Constitution. But I think it's important to have these discussions. We have actually had a lot of folks from both caucuses who are in support of doing something, what I'll call radical, around anti-displacement and keeping folks in their homes. So that's one to watch.
Okay, thank you. Representative Lovick, is there a bill or a couple bills that you were hoping would cross the finish line last session that you'll be looking to see get through this year?
You know, we had a tremendous session last year. This year, the 2021 session was just fantastic. I was standing there presiding over, I would say, about 60% of the bills, and it was just amazing, the great work that we did. I had a couple of bills that I wish I would have probably spent more time working on them. Having served in the Coast Guard, I wanted to pass a bill to deal with boater safety. I believe that was House Bill 1088. And I had a small little bill. It was like less than 1 page. And I couldn't believe that all it did was just increase the retirement age for our Washington Guard members. And we passed it out of the House unanimously, passed it out of the committee in the Senate. And I just wanted to honor those fantastic people, because I had worked with them when I was county executive during the Oso mudslide. And some of them wanted to continue working past a certain age, and I just couldn't. I did everything I could. So it's little bills like that, but it means that we just have to work a little bit harder. We got them over to the Senate, and that's a spot that you just need to be there in person. And not being in person, couldn't walk into a senator's office and say, pull this bill to the floor. Just small bills like that.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I want to encourage everyone, if you have a question, if you're on Zoom, your place to type in your question is at the bottom in the Q&A section. And if you are joining us tonight on Facebook or on YouTube, in the comment section, and we are busily collecting those and getting ready to share those with our elected representatives today. So my next question has to do with education. We are looking at a shortage of teachers and other staff members, people like myself who got a little more white hair and are reaching that age where we need some young, fresh, energetic people to come in and replace us. What can you do to help with that? Let's start with Ms. Berg, Representative Berg.
Yes. So I will say, we are very sad that teachers are deciding to retire, because I think all of our teaching professionals are amazing servants, and I wish everyone would keep going. But we do understand that. But there's also an issue of compensation. There's an issue of safety. There are many issues that go around why someone decides in any profession to do something new and different. And so I'm happy to say and proud to say for compensation, the Everett School District, we do pay the highest on average teacher salaries of the state. And I think that's something that we've prioritized, and it helps keep and retain really good teaching staff. But that said, there's more to life than compensation. So I think for me, when I look at teaching, it goes from the beginning teacher all the way to folks thinking about retirement, and making sure that we're supporting teachers at every step. So making sure that as we look at the teacher prep process, we had a great bill that passed that really streamlined and took out a piece of that process that was not working for folks. And so that's decreasing a barrier, getting more folks in the classroom. Another great initiative that I've seen locally at many districts, and of course supported and encouraged by the state, which is grow your own. And so taking our paraeducators and putting them on track, both financially as well as giving them a time allotment to become certificated teachers. That's the best. That's really one of the best ways to get teachers, is to grow your own, either through paraeducators or through having a teaching program, a teaching pipeline in your high school into your local college. So there's a lot of innovative ways to get more people into the profession, but we have to start asking ourselves honestly, as thought leaders in education, why are folks leaving? And if it's not for retirement, then we have to dig deeper into retention. And I will say, as a policymaker now, one of the reasons I ran for the legislature was so I could do more for folks when it comes to education, is that we need to look at when we hear a barrier, we as policymakers need to figure out, is there a legislative nexus for us to reduce or remove that barrier? So it's a constant iterative process that's always going to be getting better, but I'm happy to say that we've made strides in the right directions as of now. But to your point, Mr. Truett, there's going to be more folks retiring and making other decisions, so we need to keep this process going.
Okay, let me follow up too with that. And as I look in my classrooms, for some time now, it's been this wonderful diversity of students and families representing our community. But when we look at the background of our teachers, most of them are like me. We're Caucasian teachers. So what can be done to encourage our teacher population to look more like our students? What can we do to encourage minority participation in the fields of education?
You know, when I was county executive, I had a wonderful meeting with the president and the vice president of Pilchuck Uniserve. And I was thinking, while I was sitting there, they came in, I remember Tuesday, early in the morning, I'm thinking, why would they be coming to the exec's office? I'm in office. And what they basically said to me is they wanted my thoughts on exactly what you're saying. And it came down to the point that we all need to be recruiters. We need to recruit, recruit, recruit. I was on a call tonight. I won't give you all the details of what we talked about, but I was on a Zoom call with the governor today, and we're talking about recruiting in other areas. And I reminded him, I said, Governor, when I was a younger state trooper, all of us had the responsibility to recruit. We saw a person, I'm in the gym today, talk with them about becoming a teacher, talk with them about becoming, back when I was a trooper, about becoming a trooper. We just have to take it upon ourselves and say that it's our responsibility to do everything we can to recruit, and to recruit. It should be, like I've said before, it should be the broccoli on the table. It should be, if there's nothing else on the table, you're going to eat the broccoli. We need to step up and recruit people, to encourage them to go into education, because like, you know, my admiration for you, Mr. Truett, and for all of the teachers and all the classrooms that I get to visit, I consider you guys just a tremendous nation builders, and that's the message we need to get out there. So I think it comes down to recruiting.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. And Mr. Truett, can I just chime in too, just because it's a passionate subject for me as well. And I know exactly what you mean when you say you look around your classroom and you see the changing demographics. And I tell you, when I walk into classrooms like that, I always look and I think, you know, this is our global majority. These aren't, here we might say minority, but I will tell you the global majority is now in most of our classrooms across this wonderful district. And it just makes my heart sing. And so as we teach and we talk and we encourage the global majority, we need to have folks who look like them, who have lived experiences just like these students. And so part of that recruitment piece, I think, is really thinking outside the box, talking to different schools and universities and places where we sometimes haven't, but also retention. And so I will tell you, and you've probably seen it firsthand in your hallways of the school. I'm passionate about Jackson. That's where my kiddos are. But we really need to make sure we retain the teachers of color that come in, and that's a heavy lift. And so when I look at the numbers of the folks that we recruit, when I see them leaving after a year, after 2 years, and making other decisions, that's where I think as district leaders, as educational thought leaders, and as policymakers, we need to focus our attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Important issues. Well, we still have a few more minutes for some more questions. And next question goes specifically from our audience to Mr. Lovick. Last year, you passed funding to create a task force to perform an after-action review of the pandemic. We are now in the second year of the pandemic. What additional factors should be revised by this task force?
So last year during this time, I was actually going around collecting signatures for a bill that I sponsored, because the original bill was going to create a statewide pandemic preparation and response task force. And we're supposed to have bills that are simple, things like STOP, with simple acronyms. That was not an acronym that would work. We actually put $500,000 in the budget to create an after-action review. And believe it, that question is timely. Believe me when I tell you that we had our first meeting of the task force this past Monday. I was down in Algona and I took my computer with me, and we're looking at, we know we're still in the pandemic, but the idea behind it is to look back and tell us what went right, what went wrong, and what we must do better. And when I was talking with the members on the task force, I told them, I said, in light of the untimely death of our former Secretary of State and four-star General Colin Powell, I was reading a book called Risk. And the person who wrote the book said, we didn't fight COVID-19 as the United States of America, we fought it as 50 separate states. I want to make sure that when we address the pandemic, we address it as a state of Washington and not one county doing one thing, another county doing something else. So the idea is to tell us what we did right, what we did wrong, and what we must do better. And I walked away from that first meeting so excited that with the members that we have on the task force, that we're going to answer a lot of questions, realizing that we are still in the pandemic, but this is the time to do it.
Okay.
Thank you for the question.
You bet. Thank you. And we are closing in on closing remarks, but we have time for one more question. This one comes from our audience, and it is: 1 in 10 Washingtonians consistently struggle with hunger. What is being done right here in Snohomish County to address food insecurity? Representative Berg, can you start us off on that?
Yeah, and thank you for that question, because that is one of the ones we didn't get to cover yet this evening. And so food insecurity in Snohomish County is still, unfortunately, it's just a huge problem. One thing we did see with COVID was the federal government made a very low barrier to accessing food, help, and supports. And that was one of those weirdly good unintended consequences, is that we said, okay, that, all hands on deck, everybody needs to get fed. And that was from our schoolhouses that you saw giving out free meals to everyone who showed up. And just so you know, that's continuing this year. So all of our students in the entire state, regardless of economic status, are receiving free lunch and free breakfast. But right here in Snohomish County, we saw partners stepping up in ways they never thought they'd have to. And I would talk to folks who were running different types of community centers that didn't deal with food security, but all of a sudden they were dealing with food insecurity. They said the kiddos, and I do love that word, kiddos, are coming in and they're just hungry. And so what do? How do we get them food? So then they were able to work with other partners like Northwest Harvest and Food Lifeline to get food boxes to the folks who needed them most. That said, we are trying with all of our might at the state level to continue the resources that were provided to what we found were kind of food deserts that we didn't know about before COVID. So we've had a new round of grant funding go out. It's not enough. I will tell you that right now. And that's going to be one of the things we have to do in early action is find more money for food security in our communities. But it is something. And so know that is top of mind. We are meeting often, almost weekly, to talk about food insecurity in the various, how this is affecting various communities. That said, I also want to say a little good information and good news is that our Lake Stevens Food Bank is looking at moving into a beautiful new, larger facility that will do more than just food. It's actually going to be almost a community center hub type of facility. They were able to secure more money. I believe it was just last week. They got an additional round of funding from our county. So thank you to our county council for giving them another $600,000 towards that project. So again, it's all hands on deck. We know there's still a very large need, but we are getting funding to the community through new avenues that honestly we didn't have before. So those will continue.
Okay. Yeah, and I just briefly, I'll agree with Rep. Berg on everything that she said. We were both on the phone. I know she jumped on the line to advocate for the additional $600,000 for the Lake Stevens Food Bank. And we were able to get $8 million for food bank construction, and there was another $26 million in emergency cash assistance. That still doesn't answer the question, doesn't cover everything that we need to do, and we know we need to do more. And we are going to do our absolute best because we need a whole community. We can't have people being hungry in our community, and we're going to do what we need to do.
Okay. Thank you, Representative Lovick. Well, we're closing in on finishing up for tonight. I just want to thank everyone for participating. We do ask of our representatives, what can you do for us? And they can only go so far as the support that you provide for them. It's I've heard the term a couple times now, all hands on deck, and it's a responsibility for all of us to participate wherever we can. And so thank you for participating tonight in hearing from our representatives. And at this time, I think I'll start with Representative Lovick to make closing remarks.
I'll be very brief, Mr. Trueit. I would just underscore everything that you said. We're here to serve. I can't think of anything that I enjoy more than serving this community. This is a great community. April and I, Rep. Berg and I refer to it as the finest 44th. This is the finest district that you could ever serve in. We have great people, great communities, Marysville, Lake Stevens, Snohomish, unincorporated Snohomish County, and Mill Creek. Great areas to serve people in, and love serving you. Anything we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. I always give people my phone number. It's 425-219-0925. That's my work number. You email me, I will get back to you. I will find a way to talk with you. I see a lot of people at the gym. We are here to serve. And I always like to wish everybody peace, patience, and kindness. This has been a kind event. Really appreciate your patience, and let's be peaceful.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Representative Lovick. Representative Berg, you come from the perspective of serving in two positions. Thank you for all that you've done for us in so many ways. And what are your closing thoughts for this evening?
Well, I tell you, first, thank you so much, Mr. Trueit, for moderating this wonderful conversation. It's honestly, I think I told you beforehand, I think more people are on to see you than to see me and Rep. Lovick, because you are absolutely a pillar of our community. And also, I want to echo my thanks to our staff, both Catherine and Samir, and also Emily and our comms team, because we couldn't have had tonight without their hard work and their back end support. I want to close this out because I am in community so much, and going to schools and talking to folks and raising my kids in this beautiful, safe community. And I really want to emphasize that, because I know that in this public health crisis and with our economic, being in the midst of an economic recovery, sometimes it feels, like the world is closing in on you. But I just want to give you hope. I want to give everyone hope. We accomplished so much this legislative season because we had to. I called it the season of moonshots. It was the season where the absolute things that seemed impossible became absolutely necessary. And that's what we did. We're going to continue to do that next session. But I just want to say thank you to all the folks out there who supported us, who said, we need you to serve us in this way at this time. And just thank you to the folks of the 44th Legislative District who continue to support us and help us become better legislators. Rep. Lovick's absolutely right. We are accessible. So please reach out via email. Folks know me on social media. Lovick, I love that you give out your phone number, but I know people know they can reach me on social media or via email. And so I do encourage that, because I know there were questions we couldn't get to tonight, but I do want folks to know that we're here, we hear you, we see you, we are you, and thank you for being here tonight.
Great. Thank you, Representatives Berg and Lovick. This is how democracy lives and thrives, with participation. Once again, thank you all for joining the 44th Legislative District Representative Town Hall. Good evening and have yourself a great night. Goodbye.
Thank you.